Welcome to the Red Half of Sheffield video portion slash podcast portion for people listening to this through their headphones. My name is Chad Jarvis, one of the half of Red Half of Sheffield, and I am joined from the Along Come Norwich podcast. I'm joined by Cameron. Cameron, how are you doing this morning, afternoon, your time? And thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing really well. Like I say, I'm really enjoying the international break. It was, in terms of my own kind of split allegiances, England playing Ukraine tonight is going to be really exciting. Wales was an incredible draw yesterday against Croatia. And like I say, it's come to really enjoy the international break. To be honest, it's a break from just the general pain of club football
Yeah,
and slightly lower stakes as well, apart from the Wales side because the qualifiers are really important for that. But um,
yeah.
it's been a nice break for me, I think.
Yeah, no, I am in 100% agreement with you. It's almost like, we come out of this and it's the business end and it's the run in everybody wants to last nine or so games. And I've taken this weekend to just kind of like be able to breathe. I haven't watched any football this weekend. I'm trying to rack my brain if I have. No, I don't think I've watched any. I watch obviously England, Ukraine tonight, but in the US team beat some, I don't know, even incompetent team a lot to a little, but they'll let us down like they always do. But yeah, I'm kind of enjoying it, and I'm like, all right, I get to settle my nerves from us having the wheels come completely off of our train in the last, I don't know, month. But yeah, we might as well get into it. So let me ask you the first question. What are your thoughts on Norwich's season thus far? And
Um,
you can caveat that with the Dean Smith half, and then with the recent appointment of David Wagner, you can caveat that with two parts in the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess.
I think overall it's been an underwhelming season. I don't want to say disappointing. I think it's, even though we're getting toward the tail end of the season, a bit early for that. Now, I do think that the main issue we had was initially we sort of, in terms of Norwich's fan base, but also Norwich as a club, there is an expectation for us to challenge for promotion of late, which you could say is a level of arrogance. But equally, if you have seen successive promotions, almost every time you've gone down, you've gone straight back up. Certainly within 2 or 3 years, you do come to expect to an extent. But equally, I think that the quality of the rest of the division is lower than the last time Norwich were promoted. Also, certainly lower than when Norwich and United went up together. But having said that, it's also, I think, there's sort of the main word, especially under the Dean Smith era, which you heard a lot in our fan base, was just disconnect. I think that we had such a close connection to Daniel Farker, and he had such a clear identity in the club, and he just was so at one with the fan base. We understood him, he understood us. That Dean Smith just wasn't like that, and I think that we didn't really get on with him. He didn't really get on with us. But to be fair to him as well, he's come almost straight off the back of Aston Villa, the club he supports, to a club who's lost a manager which the fan base really loved. His style of football didn't really gel. Again, I'm sure he's a really lovely person, but it just didn't. It didn't ever work for us. It's totally different. So I think one of the reasons United have had such great successes post Wilder, you've then gone straight into Paul Heckingbottom, who again, he's from up the road in Royston. He's played for the club. He gets the club. He gets the fan base. That's my perception
Mhm.
of it anyway. And I think that there's been that natural continuity. I think they're not the same person. I think Wilder's probably a little bit more heart on his sleeve than Heckingbottom. I think
Yeah,
it's to say the
yeah,
least.
yeah,
Um, but I think in changing David Wagner, he is not just because of his own background and being a sort of German and Big coach, but also just the way he is a person, he has that connection more. So that's there, and the match day experience is more enjoyable. Has the football changed massively? I think at first there was a slightly more of an attacking output. I think our main issue for me this season has been a sort of slight weakness in centre backs. They are quite mistake prone, but there has been at least more free flowing attacking football. The game against Stoke wasn't that, but I think that he had injuries and he set up in that way. I mean, I was watching it, I was really bored. I was
Yeah,
sort of like watching the clock. I can't wait to leave and go have a drink somewhere else because it's like I'm just stood
yeah,
in the cold on
yeah,
this terrace in Stoke. But yeah, that would I say would be the main thing for us is whilst playoffs are still on, I think we're kind of like we're not expecting to be in them like or we don't think it's a certainty anyway. We could
yeah,
do on paper, but I think it's a tough run in for us compared to other teams as well, especially those already in the playoffs. And I think teams like Middlesbrough, Blackburn are all really really strong as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, that's a good caveat to my next question. Is it like actually it's kind of a two-parted question, and I'll front load it with the end of the managerial talk you had. Where was the fan base? You said it was so separated from Dean Smith, who, in my opinion, I don't think he can coach any. He couldn't coach his way out of a paper bag. Um, so would you say the fan base was a majority for him being sacked? And what were your original thoughts before games had been played of the club bringing in David Wagner? Did you like, oh man, this is a good signing? He did so good, did so well, Premier League experience.
Um, I think with Dean Smith, I would say that it was more split than you thought, and I think that was part of the problem is that there was one group of fans who felt Dean Smith needed more time and he wasn't being supported in the way he should be, which
Yeah.
I think there is validity to that to some extent. I don't agree, but I can see the argument, especially when Norwich don't have a reputation for high turnovers of managers. We are known for giving managers a lot of time.
Hmm.
I do think that he stayed on too long. I think that one of the main issues with that divide between people who wanted him to go and people who wanted him to have more time was the disconnect then spread within the fan base as well, um, which I think David Wagner everybody has got behind more. In terms of Dean Smith's own ability, I think he can be a very talented guy. I think he had that Aston Villa because I think he had that connection. He definitely had it at Brentford and he definitely had it at Walsall as well. And I think
Hmm.
that was one of the other issues is he's gone from having a lot of success at Walsall, a lot of success at Brentford, where you could argue that actually the current Brentford team was kind of built on his foundations. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not going to say it's for certain, but I think there's an argument to make that he has had significant role in the kind of rise of that club up the divisions. And obviously, Villa speaks for itself. Is that obviously he did have Jack Grealish,
Hmm.
but he was also responsible for making Jack Grealish into the player he was. I think that there was a lot of man management there, and they had an understanding. Um, but then, as I say, I think leaving that to then come somewhere very quickly as well.
Hmm.
I think that it's. I think that did have an effect. I think then him being sacked to go to the end of his tenure. I think David Wagner, I think he is a sensible choice. I understand why they made that choice. I think not just because it falls in Daniel Parker sort of mold. I think just the way he is kind of more the type of manager Norwich fans like and want at the minute. On a personal level, at the time when we were looking for manager, I really wanted Chris Wilder
Yeah.
um, for the same reason as I felt he just, even though he's not necessarily the most popular person in Norfolk, but I think he just has that he's just always struck me as a very genuine person who, at any club he's been at, he's just has a sort of level of passion and a level of man management which a lot of managers don't have.
Hmm.
And he's the type of manager I think anywhere he is, he will a bit like sort of you could say Neil Warnock as well, not in terms of the way they play football, but just in terms of how much they advocate for the clubs which they manage.
Yeah.
I think he would have been a good choice. I know a lot of people didn't agree, but I think when Dave Wagner was saying, I did sort of understand, and I think having that sort of previous relationship with Stuart Webber as well, who is influential at the club and is an important figure. Again, I would say an arguably controversial figure, but I think it did make sense for where we were at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems to have sparked some life into that Norwich side, because they were kind of almost just like, not as you said, you kind of were just like not performing up to the level of what Norwich City supporters have come to know of you guys being in this division, where it seems every year you come down, you almost immediately go right back up. And is the fan base okay with a year in this division to almost get things sorted, have a little bit of churning through the squad, younger, youthful players? You said Norwich aren't like Watford and change their manager every 6 weeks. Is this like a reset? And if you don't make the playoffs, then a go again to probably push for automatic promotion next season?
I think potentially, I think within my own kind of echo chamber, that is sort of generally the consensus. I do think that, it's not, we don't have a God given right to be promoted, and we
Hmm.
don't have a God given right to even challenge for promotion. I think that if we did do that, which is what we did under Daniel Farker, and we had a season we finished 14th and then we went on to win the league, I think we would have to have quite a significant rebuild, like put a lot of energy into younger players, think about which core members of the squad we want to build around currently as well. I think Mark Antonazio has a role to play in that as well, because we do have slightly more spending power now. Um, but you then have to think, how far would that rebuild have to go? Because I mean, if you compare, say, Norwich and United squads, on paper they're not. I know United have strengthened arguably more than we have, but we have, we spent money this summer. We have like Nunez, Sarah come in, who were expensive players by our standards, but very similar to United, we also have players like Tim Pukki, Max Aarons as well, who've been promoted before. Grant Hanley as well, captain, who been promoted. They have an understanding together. They played together for a long time. Again, much like United have with players like Billy Sharp, um, which I do think would help. The other problem with investment, which I think the club is having to balance, is we've put a lot of money into our training facilities and infrastructure, with the logic being, which I think is completely right, is we can have a real world class training ground, and that will then mean that we're able to attract more players. Because just because you can afford players, it's an issue Newcastle had till they invested in training ground. You They might not want to come if they have two options and it's your place of work to say, these are where you'll be training every day, or here's where you'll be training every day. And one's world class, the other is
Yeah.
10, 20 years out of date. They want to go for world class, which was sensible and I think worked really well. And doing things like the investment fund into community projects as well, I think it really lends in some type of club we, as a fan base, we see ourselves we want to be. But then you now have this question of the club are kind of exploring expanding Carrow Road out to be about 30,000. They've only just started talking about it. But obviously, that's going to cost money. So then you say, well, do you invest in infrastructure and have that as your legacy to say training facilities, playing staff facilities, and an improved stadium, but not necessarily having the league position to go with it? Or do you invest in the league position, but then that's potentially unsustainable?
Yeah. No,
And
yeah, it's almost like a double-edged sword in many cases.
absolutely. And I don't envy the people at the club, and we can make the decisions. I think that there is um, also potentially, well, a big point of country recently was around Dean Smith and sitting in the local media, where the club and local media had quite a significant falling out to the point where they local media don't have the same privileges they did previously have, and this has kind of rumbled on in the background as well, and it's meant the club is from the perspective a significant proportion of the fan base, the club seems less transparent than it was when we went up under Parker as well, which isn't necessarily helpful. Again, it goes into that idea of a disconnect and that feeling of togetherness not quite being the same, because I think that is kind of Norwich's core DNA has always been about not being like other clubs and being successful but on our own terms, and to say
Mhm.
if we got to the Premier League and we don't succeed and we go down, we finish 20th. If we're making a profit, we're not in debt. We're all of our money's coming from kind of reasonably ethical sources, or at least being transparent about it. If we can't be successful with that model, we're not the problem. And I think that kind of, I think, is just getting, especially just because we had a hard season. That's maybe not quite as at the forefront as it was when we were previously promoted. Which, to me personally, I think that is led into that sense of this season being a bit underwhelming.
Yeah. It definitely makes sense, and it's a balancing act for most of these clubs, and it's with the balance of the game of football being controlled solely by the almighty dollar bill or pound over in England. It sucks because it you have to balance that, and it's like you want to make a profit and not be massively in debt. And then,
Mm.
I mean, I'm sure you read 2 weeks ago the rumors were that United were going to go into administration
Yeah,
because unpaid bill. They couldn't afford fertilizer. They turned off the undersoil. It's just like at the blink of an eye, you could be like everything smooth sailing, and then you like hit a proverbial wall, and it just everything goes to hell in a handbag, and you're like, oh, what do we do now? And so, yeah, I don't envy anybody that is in the front office staff at any of these clubs
no,
that are trying to make it run not corruptly and not run it into the ground to achieve success. Especially for you know you're not I I don't want to call them smaller clubs, but it's your I guess second tier teams compared to the big
yeah.
spenders in the Prem.
I think it's just, it's true for any, you know meet like good sized provincial club all have these
Mhm.
issues, because I think that most clubs in certainly top half championship are all well established clubs with you know
Yeah.
decent sized fan bases. I think that the main issue with English football more generally is it's operating in this hyper commercialized sphere, but association football as a game and the way it was, the whole infrastructure of the way the FA and the leagues work was never intended for the to be for this hyper commercialized kind of system. It was a game designed to be played by teams of ex public school pupils,
Yeah.
kind of at an amateur level, and that system and that kind of currency ethos hasn't really changed. But then the whole business structure around the sport has. If you
Mhm.
compare it to almost every US sport, being not necessarily the rules, but the system being founded on like a franchising system means that it is much more sustainable in
Yeah.
that sense, and kind of does make it. But I think that is it's not going to change overnight. Hopefully, having the regulator coming in will make a difference, but you can't making it. There's not much you can do to change it at
Yeah.
a grassroots level. So you just kind of have to hope that you know people do run clubs the right way, which I think on the whole Norwich and United have done really successfully over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. Back to the game, because I usually, as I said before we started recording, we'll probably get off on a tangent, and I could just talk for days about just random football stuff. Um, Give us a few of the danger men for the Canaries. We know to the American Blades over here, there is one American that leads the line for Norwich. So give us an update on Josh Sargent and the other danger men for the Canaries.
So yeah, we'll start with Josh. He's probably been our most potent attacking output this season. He's very popular. I'm a big fan of his as well. He has really kicked on. I think this is a really interesting season for him, given that his previous seasons at Werder Bremen, and also in the time he's been with us as well before being relegated, he has not really ever played a season where he's been playing for a team which isn't an underdog.
Mm.
Not necessarily one of the big guns per se. I don't think we are this season, as we've already said, but we are definitely, one of the better teams in the division. And I think that has really allowed him to come out of his shell and shine. I think he did have a tough season last year. I think he had a couple of good patches of form, but this season I think he's been really impressive. He has done a lot in terms of his, again, like growing his connection with the fan base. As I say, he's really popular. I think he going to the World Cup for him as well. Admittedly, he probably didn't play as much as he'd liked, but I think having that limelight on him, having that opportunity, and also for us as a club to see one of our players playing at a World Cup and having quite a successful tournament. I don't know whether US fans would feel that about the World Cup, but I think given the kind of group and draft, I think it was a decent tournament for the US. In terms of other players, Teemu Pukki, obviously he is not as young as he was. He's not old by any means. He's mid-30s or early 30s, but he's still, not playing quite as regularly as he would have done. But I think there is a positive in that there is now competition where previously he was just a number one striker. Again, I think he's going to really benefit from having this international break. I think it's come at a great time for us and him. He'll have that level as kind of just confidence boost, and psychologically, he always seems to really enjoy playing for Finland. And then in terms of other players, I think Ono Hernandez will probably win Player of the Season for two reasons. One is that he is a skillful player. He's a winger. He's kept the cutting inside, which is kind of his preferred method of creating chances rather than crossing. But he is just an absolute agent of unmitigated chaos in that I don't even think he knows what he's going to do with the ball when he gets in the final third, yet alone the opposition. So, it could be a short cross, could be a long cross, could be cutting in. He could be just trying to do like a, sort of a long, mazy dribbling run. Nobody knows. You have to just wait and find out. But he just also has this, again, real sense of identification with the club in that he has the club crest tattooed on his arm.
Yeah.
He does occasionally forget which arm the crest is on, but he
yeah, love it.
Everyone loves waiting to see him warm up as well. And I think that he's been so instrumental in kind of pushing the atmosphere forward it might not have been. Just to go back to Pukki, because I forgot to mention as well, he is, I think, at a contract end of this season. And there is sort of this ongoing narrative: is he going to sign a new contract? How long will it be for? If you believe the chants being sung, the years go up and up and up. So I think last match it got to 9 more years was what everyone wanted from him.
Wow.
But he's but I think 1 or 2. If you ignore what fans sing at matches, I think 1 or 2 would be potentially reasonable. I think it just depends on him and his fitness and actually where we are as a club. Nobody doubts that how much he enjoys or likes the club. I think it's just about game time and his own fitness levels and whether it's going to be the right fit for both. But that's an ongoing thing. The only other player is Max Aarons, who's kind of really broke onto the scene in our first promotion season under Daniel Farker. His first game was actually in the East Anglian Derby away at Ipswich with his first start. And since then, he's been just ever present. He is an absolute stalwart of a sort of fullback, kind of plays a wing back as well. Quite fiery. Usually, if anyone's going to get yellow carded or sent off, it tends to be him. But he's 23 now, and he's become quite an experienced kind of one of the kind of core players in the squad who have kind of done 2 promotions, and there aren't many left of them. Kind of Kenny McLean and Grant Hanley, and Tim Crew as well now, which is impressive. And I think that we could potentially lose him in the summer. I think he has a higher ceiling unless we are promoting to stay up. I think that he does deserve that progression in his career, and I don't think anyone would doubt. Very similar to James Madison when he left, like that. How much he does enjoy and care, and is grateful to the club. Yeah. But I just think that I wouldn't begrudge him leaving. I just really hope he doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, this is a good Norwich side, and as you were talking, I did pull up the enthralling game we did have at Bramall Lane, and it brought back to
Yes.
which Norwich were unlucky. Timo Pukki did have a penalty, I believe, saved in that game, and you guys probably should have came away with all three of the points. And I mean, is that the only time you've just seen the Blades? And if you've watched us more, what are your thoughts on our season as a whole?
So I was at that game. I think on a broader scale, just not even outside the season, I think that Norwich and United always have, certainly since you've met from League One, always seem to have really tight games,
Mhm.
and they're always quite fiery. For me, with Ipswich not in the league, I think that it is kind of the closest thing we have to a derby is the games against United. Um, I think it probably stems from kind of that initial game at Bramall Lane with Chris Wilder getting annoyed about the coach, which I just think is really funny. I think he does as well, but I quite enjoy that it's created that kind of sort of mutual hate's a strong word, but definitely sort of
Dislike.
dislike.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is really good. As we've discussed before, my fiance and all her family are all huge Wednesdayites as well, so it just adds that other like little bit of spice in it for me as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Just why sort of there's a lot in our house of checking United results to basically check if you've lost, and you
Yeah.
don't at all. I think that I've been really impressed with United this season. I think that the way that you play is again kind of a natural evolution from Wilder, and that you've kept that sense of kind of not just footballing identity, but that sense of togetherness with the fan base.
Yeah.
Um, I think more broadly, I think with United, I think kind of similar to us that you are because both Sheffield clubs are historic clubs and important to the history of the game. But I think that there's also that sense of you're not like a super club either, and I think you're kind of aware of that.
Hmm.
And I don't know if there's this perception with United fans that you kind of almost don't want to be. Certainly, United fans I know quite like the fact that you are kind of a historic club with which has a lot of respect in terms of the game's heritage, but also has that slight kind of edge to you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Other historic clubs like perhaps like Villa or Wednesday maybe don't have. I think United have that kind of little bit of kind of grit there,
Yeah.
which does set you apart. Which I think again is shown in this side. I think again Billy Sharp is the obvious player. He just kind of is the like human embodiment
Yeah.
of what United are as a club.
Yeah, if United were a person, it would be Billy Sharp 100%. I mean, he eats, sleeps, and breathes. He'll probably be playing for the club for when he's 60 out there with his walker and his wheelchair trying to get into the starting 11, I would imagine. But uh, as who do you what United players pop up on your radar for like, oh, we gotta try and take him down or slow him down or worry you guys a little bit.
Um, I don't. You're going to test my knowledge now because I'm awful when it comes to players, especially opposition players. Um, I think the player 'cause he scored in the last game is Ollie McBurney
Oh yeah, yeah,
because
oh yeah, yeah,
every time he just causes problems. Like every single time we play, he's just like I can't again a bit like I can't decide like you know what sort of player he is. In some cases, I can't tell if he's having a good or bad game,
yeah,
but
yeah.
he will almost always score. Especially against us. I can imagine United fans absolutely love him
Hmm.
um, because
It's
he's
been
just
for most of his time here, he sucked, and he recently
yeah
found form the beginning of the midway part of this season, and he's been absolutely on it. But yeah, it's been much of a love hate punch relationship because he
yeah
likes to hit people.
yeah. But I think I think that's kind of true for most United side. Like, I think when I picture you playing, I know that you're not doing kind of overlapping centre backs anymore, which I mean, personally, I was tired of hearing about, but I
Yeah.
feel like I have to bring it up with it. But there is just this sense of attacking output and a level of physicality in a lot of your players, particularly
Mhm.
the back line, which does worry me for this game because I think that I think we have a level of attacking output. I think that we sometimes do lack in physicality. I think the game against Blackburn at Carrow Road was a good example of that in the league. That is, but I also think that when you take United's backline, like I say, they're all physical, they're all well experienced, they all kind of know what the championship's about, um, and that will cause problems for our striker. So Josh Sargent is not the big. He's tall, but he's not the most physically imposing player. Pookie's obviously a sort of slightly more diminutive about the two of them. I think Adam Ida for us has that kind of frame can deal with that and could be a good option for this game. Um, but then you compare that to Outland, they are sort of big, but I just think that there is a level of mistake proneness to
Mhm.
Norwich's backline, which United just don't have. I think your goal difference speaks volumes
Yeah. Yeah.
for that as well. And I
So
think as again, you oh, no, go
go
on, it's
ahead.
okay.
No, go on.
Yeah, it was just to think like I do see a lot of parallels as well to previous times Norwich have been promoted, where you just find ways to win. In that,
Mhm.
you might concede, but the level of kind of desire to win, and when you look at the game against Blackburn, the FA Cup's a great example of just the late goal there and that desire to just go, we're not letting this go any further, and we are going to win games is
Mhm.
just the mark of a promotion side to me. Again, like it doesn't matter how many you concede as long as you score more, which is again a huge cliche, but I think for the championship it does ring true. I think lack of
Yeah.
goals is more of a problem than necessarily conceding.
Oh, for sure. 100%. So I'll ask you this question. Come full time Saturday afternoon at Carroll Road, score predictions and thoughts
I
on the
think
match.
I think it's going to be again a really tight game. I think if I was a United fan, I would be expecting to win. I don't know if United fans are. Just if you just look at where we are in the league, you might think it's going to be a tough game. I think that United do have the edge over us quite significantly, um, and I think that you could probably see both teams scoring because again, it's very rare that it's a 0-0 between Norwich and United. I think my heart really boringly says 1-1 would be really good for us because we're at home and I would take it. Um, but if I was to break the match down, I could see it being you would come out, just all guns blazing, but we would just completely against the run of play just score something. Not from a free kick, it would be like some through ball where you're kind of gonna we somehow managed to beat your press. And we'll be like, how did that happen? And it'll be on like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you will score. And there is like a bell curve with Norwich's games where it's like the closer you get to half time, the
Yeah.
chances like of, of the opposition going to go up incrementally. And then you probably will then score, or either just after as well, like around half time, like within 5 minutes of the other side, you will equalise. And then it will stay like that for at least 70 minutes, potentially 80. But when it comes to 80 minutes, the chance of you then scoring will become exponential and it won't stop. So it will go from being probably 1-1 at half time to you possibly winning 3-1 by the
Yeah.
end of it. And those will be really late.
In those, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I know there's going to be goals in this game because you alluded to there's hardly rarely between these two sides are there ever no goals by both sides. And my quick score prediction in my head came 3-1. But historically, out of the international break over the last, I don't know, since we were under Wilder, every time we came out of the international break, we either We look flat. We look not how we were going into it, and it almost sucks that such enthralling game against Blackburn to get us to the semifinals of the FA Cup is going to be 2 weeks in the past when this game kicks off, because I think
Yeah.
with that enough of the momentum from that game would have drove us on, and we would have got promotion easier than it looked in the past month and a half. And I'm hoping that there's a little bit of that FA Cup magic still in it, and where the momentum just drives us to a win, because we desperately need to get off on the right foot out of this international break. Because if we don't, Middlesbrough, they're not looking like they're going to drop off at any point. And if we have another wobble, they're right on our heels. So I'm going to be completely 180 from where I usually go and give a negative result. But I could see us, there's definitely going to be goals in this. And I think it's 3-2 to United. I could easily see the same scoreline from the reverse fixture, 2-2. But I mean, I like to think that it's going to be a pretty open game, as it was at Bramall Lane in the reverse fixture. And, I think we just take one more chance than you guys do, and it's 3-2.
I think, yeah, again, you saying 2-2 or 3-2 is perfectly, you know, um, plausible. I think, again, I haven't checked, but my instinct with this as well, with this international break, is we've come into it on such a poor run of form.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's no wins in three. Obviously, we did get a draw in Stoke, which you could say could be a better point than it maybe looks like now. But potentially having that international break will be a good reset for us. And Angus Gunn's coming back, having got his Scotland call up, and I think it will give a psychological boost to an extent. But then it just comes down to a matter of quality as well, and to say, if we turn up on a really good day, and actually is the start of a good run of form, is that going to be enough to beat United on a bad day? Because United on a bad day is still very good at the minute. And again, we are at home as well, but I think that, again, like teams that are expected to get promoted, is that going to make as much of a difference as you'd maybe expect?
Yeah. So I've got just a couple more questions for you. Okay, so this is the scenario: full-time whistle, last game of the season. Where do Norwich finish? Playoffs, or are you guys on the outside looking in come the end of the season?
I think full-time whistle, we will be. I could go optimistic, but I think, as we've kind of probably established, being pessimistic can sometimes help, because then I'm either going to have my expectations met or be pleasantly surprised. So
Yeah.
I think we will finish seventh, and we will be a couple of points adrift. I think that the teams in the playoffs are too strong. I think actually, I would rather just call the season there and have a bit of longer pre-season. I think even if we finish in the playoffs, it would be a tough ask for us to win them. And also, like, to be fair to the teams in there, it would be such an injustice if some of those, at least one of those teams, did not go up, particularly sort of Middlesbrough, who I think could potentially pick United, but I think it will probably, the top three will stay as they are.
Yeah.
And I think that all three sides really do deserve promotion.
Honestly, that's, I agree with you there. In not too many of the seasons do I say that if this league had 3 promotion spots, like automatically promotions, clearly Burnley, United, Middlesbrough, all 3 of those sides probably deserve to go up. Now, we all know what the roulette game, the playoffs are in the championship, but, it'd be unfortunate for the likes of Middlesbrough to peg us back most of the way, and then Luton come in there and beat them, and Luton go up instead of Middlesbrough. But you never know. But this is probably the most clear cut that I think the top 3 in this division have been for the last few years. I mean, usually you have your your top two that you kind of know. And then the third place, yeah, somebody could come third and then, get knocked out, bounced out in the first round of the playoffs. But this year is completely, I think, cut and dry. And it honestly, it might suck if United fall into the playoffs and get pipped by Borough at the end of the season, because I don't think we're going to be a team that's going to have too much momentum going in there. And that's what could inevitably keep us in this division if we were to fall off of our perch right now. But my last question for you, and I've recently started to ask, and we had a little bit of this conversation last night. I was definitely into the Suds when I was having this conversation. Your go-to pre-match beverage before a game at Carrow Road.
Oh, I'm gonna have to do two because it's usually it's a pint of ale. Depends on the pub because there's two ways you can go to: Fat Cat and Canary, which is the one close to my house. Like I said, my local is Norwich Bitter. If it's the Coach and Horses, then I have the Black Anna Stout there. And if it is on, my brother's brewery does a very nice stout as well, a Black Forest Stout, which is the one which, if it was on in any pub, that's what I would go for. So that's the one I'm going to say is a Wildcraft Brewery Black Forest Stout.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, I think that's all the time we have for this episode of the Red Half of Sheffield. If you haven't done so, follow our and you're watching this video. I don't know why you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, the Red Half of Sheffield. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on Facebook, the Red Half of Sheffield, on Twitter at Red Sheffield. Cameron, where can the folks find you on the Twitter sphere, social media deal?
Yeah, so you can find Along Come Norwich, which is the sort of fanzine come podcast, which I do some writing for at Along Come Norwich. That's a website, and it's also on Twitter and Instagram. And hopefully, like I say, you enjoy the stuff we've got over there because it's a mixture of match reviews, sort of more kind of football culture-y, kind of a lot of my stuff, kind of historic football history articles and things as well. If you're into that, like I say, mainly with Norwich focus, but some of it is a little bit more kind of general interest as well.
Yeah, well, and you guys can follow me if you don't already. See Jarvis_13 on Twitter and Instagram. So and I usually give this for the opposition too, so you can join in as well. Until Saturday 3 p.m. kickoff, Carrow Road, up the Blades
On the Ball City.